You've got people in Russia who are as well-educated and in some senses as worldly as us, who believe they're liberating Ukraine from the Nazis, right? They believe it because that's what they're being told. You have people in America who believe terrible, terrible things about the Chinese because that's what their government has told them. You have people in China who believe horrible things about Australia because that's what their government has told them.
Hey there, welcome back to the round table, the 1 Minute Millionaire round table, where today we're going to redefine the word millionaire and talk about all the other things that make someone a successful person and balanced. And to do that, I've got four amazing people next to me, good friends of mine. They've participated and interacted with me before in things, whether it's LinkedIn or on the 1 Minute Millionaire pop quiz show. I'm going to introduce you to them all really shortly, but one thing we like to do at the start of this show, round table, is ask our amazing guests one by one, what's the one thing they brought to the table today that's near and dear to them in their career and they've held on to throughout their journey and really strikes a chord with them. So I'm going to start with Catherine Cervasio.
Sure.
Am I saying that right?
You are.
Woo,
perfect.
First time. Tell me, what have you brought to the table today?
Well, I brought along my trusty Good Luck pen, and I used this to sign my biggest contract last year during COVID, and it's very special. I've left it in China, gone and picked it up in my next trip in China. It's been all around the place and I still have it and I always use it. So that contract was signed on Zoom and I made them stop when I went to get my pen and signed it with that contract. So I just feel it's got great energy and it came from somewhere special and I take it everywhere.
Does the pen have a name?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
But it's a Greta Garbo limited edition, so I do love it. I think it epitomises me.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome.
Yeah.
Next up, David Lemphers, CTO, founder, investor, mentor, Austin, Texas, Seattle, the States for 10, 15 years, then back to Australia. Have you brought something from overseas or locally to the table?
Yeah, so I actually brought my Bash RC file, which for folks who don't know, there's an operating system called Ubuntu or Linux, and every time you start it up, it sets up all your preferences. And this file started in my second startup and was started by a guy named Shreyas Karnik, who's like an absolute legend engineer, still over in the US. And every startup or every project I've worked on, it's been tweaked and changed just slightly. So it's customized and like just perfect in setting up my environment now, but it's like kind of accrued and developed over these years. I love it.
So for a non-developer watching, if you had to describe what you're holding visually?
It's like your favorite comfy pair of slippers. Like, it's like developer slippers and like they're worn in and they're exactly perfect.
I love that. Awesome. Louise Schultze, founder, investor, mentor, all the way back from New York from like a week ago. How are you and what did you bring to the table?
I'm good, thank you. I brought a photo, it's actually of my son and my grandparents. I have a few of these of both sides of my family, grandparents with my son, and it represents the past, present, and the future. So the present being myself, my son being the future, my grandparents being the past, and I work on it that every decision I make, everything that I do, should be something that I'd be proud to tell my grandparents and should set up the future as a whole for my son and his generation. So yeah, it's a good reminder.
I love that. Jordan Green, angel investor, and the man behind setting up probably Australia's first angel investor community. What have you brought to the table today?
Oh, thank you, Brandon. Well, for a lot of people like me, it's not about a single thing. It's about habits or behaviours. And for me, I think it's about change. Mm-hmm. So originally I'm an electronics engineer. We were taught to live with constant change and uncertainty. I've been doing startups for many decades. And I've lived in Silicon Valley, I've lived in the Middle East, I've lived in a bunch of places. And it's always about living with constant change, and investing in startups is about living with constant change and being comfortable with that and actually looking forward to it. So, and I think it's a distinguishing feature. I think there are a lot of people who talk about it, but not a lot of people who can actually live with it on a constant basis. And I think that's where the success and innovation comes from.
Love it, perfect. Now I brought something to the table, it's nowhere near as exciting as you guys, but I'm going to have to stand up to show you. They're my lucky shoes from New York. They're no name, no label, but I eyed them off in the Soho district of New York when we're on our honeymoon. You're another put my foot right up. Sorry, Louise. There you go, Ben, not very flexible. And I bought them when another guy was eyeing them off, and my wife said, get them, and I acted and I grabbed them. But it just reminds me of when we were in New York. I've only been to the States once, fell in love with the country, the city, and I wear them when I'm wanting to feel lucky or doing something special. So one of them's kind of falling apart, but I make it work. Anyway, that's everyone and what they've brought to the table. Welcome, guys. Thank you for being here. The next thing we're going to do is a little pop quiz. So I want to give everyone an opportunity to test their buzzers. I'm going to ask you 10 questions, no peeking at the answers. Now, if you get one wrong, it's a point off. Get it right, it's a point. Don't answer at all, and you sit on 0. So you've got to get involved. Catherine, let me hear that buzzer.
Yes!
Dave.
Yeah.
Louise.
I couldn't think of anything I'd rather do.
Jordan.
G'day, mate.
G'day. All right, beautiful. Here we go, guys. Question 1. What soccer team is colloquially known as the Red Devils?
Oh!
Dave.
Menu.
Okay, Dave, well done. Number 2. What is the first feature-length animated film from Disney?
No!
No, Snow White?
Yes, there we go. Okay, he's been looking at my questions. No. What was Nike's original name? Nike. Their original name as a company. Does anyone want to have a stab? I won't take... Adidas. Okay. Blue Ribbon Sport. Oh, no, yeah. Question number 4. What is the fastest car by top speed ever made?
No!
Dave.
Veyron? Bugatti Veyron?
No. Louise.
Tesla?
No.
Yes.
Ferrari.
No. The red one. Jordan.
Cheers,
Oh,
mate.
well, I don't remember the name, but it would be the one that won the land speed record.
Well, we'd have to verify with the judges, but it was a Hennessy Venom GT.
But I'll bet that didn't go as fast as the land speed record.
So I've got 3 people on -1. Dave's back on 0. We're going well, guys. Actually, no, he's on 1. He's on 1. Question number 5. Where and why was the soft drink Fanta invented?
In Germany for the Nazis.
Wow, that is fantastic. Well done, Jordan. Yes. That was fantastic. Well done. So you're on 1. No, you're on 0 because you were -1. There we go. All right. So number 6. Which soft drink company, for a short time, became the 6th largest naval power in the world?
You'll be right, mate.
Coca-Cola.
No. Anyone else want to have a go?
Soft drink company.
There's only a couple around.
No!
Pepsi?
Yeah, why not, Dave? Well done. Look at that, he's getting involved. So, question 7. Which driver has won the most Formula 1 championships?
I'd love to.
Michael Schumacher.
Yes, well done, Louise. Okay, Louise is on 1, Jordan's on 0. Catherine, I think you're -1, but that's okay. You're on 2, with 2 questions left. Question 9. Which nation created the first ironclad battleship?
You, buddy.
United States.
Correct, Jordan. All right, so I think you're equal with Dave now. This last question could really determine bragging rights for a long time. Number 10, who said, I found the crown of France in the gutter and I picked it up?
I couldn't think of anything I'd rather
It's a guess. Napoleon.
Correct, well done. All right, so does that mean we've got joint winners for the pop quiz? Yeah, well done, Dave, well done, Jordan. I'm now going to open up the floor for a bit of discussion points with our group. The idea today, guys, is that you'll get an understanding from each person's perspective on where they sit on all things business, success, failure, mistakes, most importantly, and getting through this last 2.5 years, which has thrown up. So thank you everyone for being here. First question I've got, and I might start with you, Catherine, is how do you actually recognise a career opportunity at a young age and know that it's something worth pursuing, even though you might not feel 100% attached to it straight away? How do you know something's worth sticking at?
Sure. Look, I think that I said yes, like I did today, to a lot of things when I was young. I actually started working part-time at 12, and I was obviously still at school, and I think I lied about my age. I was already making and selling things. There was a bit of an entrepreneurial streak really, really early. And then I left school at 15 and I was working 2 jobs for a little while. And I sort of weaseled my way into this publishing company, and I talked my way into being able to write the beauty pages. So by 20, I was watching the art director copy and paste, and was proofreading text and things like that. So I think you can see an opening, and you've just got to give it a go, and being able to try a lot of different things, I mean, I think is really, really important, especially for young people in their careers. Although I've had this business for so long now, I've done lots of different things, and I do lots of things outside of it. So I think all of those things that I did when I was younger really led to where I am now.
Yeah.
And it's about saying yes,
Yeah.
feeling your passion and going with it.
Jordan, what would you say on that?
Oh, I think being open to the opportunity is absolutely a key part of it. I think the other thing is following your values. Do something that you enjoy and connects with you, that you can be passionate about. So it depends. You said career, but that means different things to different people. So some people say, well, it's all about making money. Well, if it's all about making money, then analyse the market, figure out where you think you can make money with something you can do, and that you can do competitively, so better than most people, if not everyone, and go that direction. But if you want to do something that's going to make you happy, the chances are that it'll be something that connects with your values and your passions, and take a risk. Give it a go. I mean, for me, it's always been about being on an adventure. I've probably never made a sensible decision about a career choice in my life, because it's always been, well, that sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's go do that. Oh, let's set up a company in Silicon Valley in the beginning of the 1990s, right? So long before the world had heard about startups. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Why? Because I'm a technologist, and that's the beating, pulsing heart of technology on the face of the planet. And like I said earlier about change. When I was there, what you knew in breakfast was different at lunch and different again at dinner, right? Whereas in Australia, the pace of change was probably in months or years. But here it was in hours. And that was absolutely a huge adventure.
I mean, I think for me, it was always trying to identify something that I found curious, but that I thought that the person I could solve the problem for would be like blown away. And so I feel like, especially starting with like an embedded hardware background, what I always wanted to have was that aha moment from someone where they go, how'd you do that? And I think that always like drove me to be like, where are those opportunities where someone goes, how did you do that? Like explain that, or show me how you did it. It was like a modern form of magic, right? Or technical form of magic. But yeah, I also think just being incredibly curious and not afraid to look stupid always puts you in like fun, interesting places.
Louise?
I actually agree with everything they said. The only thing I'll add to that is hard work. Everything you do is hard work. Yes, they're going to be elements of fun, they're going to be elements of excitement, they're going to be elements of change, but you have to apply yourself through those bits that get really hard. So hard work is really essential, and I think that starts when you're quite young. You really need to understand that the process of getting through those tough moments, and they usually hit, if you're playing a sport, it'll hit you about 6 months to a year when you've just learnt the new skills, but you have to apply them. As I said, you've got to get past, when you get past that exciting stage, hard work is always going to hit you throughout your entire career. So
the next one is, what's better for workplace cultures? Culture disruptors or cultural assimilators? Maybe start with you, Louise.
I actually feel like that was a hard one. That's an easy one. I actually think you need a little bit of both. You need those who are going to ask the questions, who are going to look at where the issues are. You need actually those looking for those particular areas. But then you need those who bring everyone together to solve the problem. So if you have only people who think that everything is fine and nothing can go wrong, they're not actually looking out for that, because life is actually that, real life. And whether you have a business or whether you have a family, or all these things, they don't run in a straight line. They're not linear. They're like a tree. They're branches. Some are weak, some are strong, but they're all held up by one core thing. So I think good leadership is able to bring all those things together. So I don't think it's about just having one or the other. I think you need a little bit of both to really expand.
or how do you know what your business might need? Because there'll be times, I'm sure, on a business's journey where it needs a bit more disruption, or whether it needs less of that and more assimilation. Like, what would you say, Catherine?
I think, look, we're a small team, but I agree with Louise, you do need a little bit of both. In the small team that we have a bit of both. And I think it's also about the person at the top managing their leadership skills and being open to change and open to feedback, so that they are empowering their team, whichever way the team member is contributing, to the solution or the change. Although we've had this business for a long time, throughout the years there's been lots of disruption and change, and there's had to be, especially with e-commerce. So I think, I agree with Louise. Yeah.
Dave, culture, you like it being disrupted?
I mean, I guess I don't think about it as like bifurcated into disruptors and assimilators. I think, and certainly in the last kind of 5 years, it's actually more about like a genuine and authentic care for the people, both in the organization and the customers you serve. And I think, if you come into the business and you genuinely care about those individuals and you start there, then you can then define whatever KPI metrics, targets and goals you need to hit. But I think if you study high performance teams, the one thing that they all share over the rank and file style organizations is that they have an incredible level of intuitive trust between each other. And I think that is what gets you through, especially in startups, high performance startups, a high degree of trust, and intuition, collective intuition tends to get you through pretty much everything.
Culture seems to be such a big thing for tech companies abroad and here to sort of attract the best talent. Wouldn't you agree, Jordan? Like, how important do you think it is in having people who challenge that internally, to be better or to be different?
Well, I agree with the others. I don't think it's about having specific people who challenge. I sort of discovered culture, if you like, workplace culture very early on, and it was really quite intuitive. Every organisation I've started with the values. The values are what matter. The values are what attract people to your team. The opportunity has to be exciting for the right kind of people, but the values are what attract people and keep people. And culture is just how you implement your values. And your values don't have to change, but your culture will change with the circumstances of the community that you're in and the pressures that are brought to bear. But if you always keep the values at the forefront, and if you have a leader who can actually constantly come back to that core, share with the team, but we're making this decision or we're behaving in this way because these are our values and these are how they tie to what we said we're trying to do, then you have a culture that is constantly adapting, doesn't need to be disrupted, because the leadership isn't dictating how everybody behaves at a superficial level, it's dictating what drives everybody's behaviour. And then people will find their own way to express that, and the adaptation is to deal with anybody who steps over a line somewhere, and you just help them see that there's a line being stepped over. It's not about punishment, it's not about reward, it's about collaboration and cooperation in a shared value system.
Love it, excellent. Can I ask a hard question now? Are we all feeling up for it? Yeah? I don't think it's that hard, but I want to ask everyone for their honest opinion on, do you think totally free speech is a positive or a negative for society? Or does there need to be a balance?
This is the Elon Musk question.
Well, it had to come up, didn't it? We love Elon. I did see that he was potentially wanting to talk about implementing a verification element to be able to use the platform, which sounds kind of, like it could help with fake accounts and everything, but also on the other hand, it's like, do we have to give more information? But I just want to understand from you guys, we're in Australia, we're not in America, but we adopt a lot of similar principles. How important is free speech to you? And do you think it's a real positive to want to hold on to and never let be infiltrated?
I don't think I think that the challenge with the free speech debate is that it's like this binary, it's presented as a binary idea, right? That you either have free speech or you don't. And I think it's like most things in society which are made up and then just agreed to by the masses, right? That, should you be able to express ideas that may challenge, preconceived and established notions? Absolutely, right? Should be able to express creative ideas and thoughts, that aren't necessarily widely held? Of course. Should you have the right to say or do things that hurt people? No, right? I don't think there's a cultural gain or there's an implicit agreement as your society that would support that. And I don't think that is saying no free speech. I think it's just saying free speech has to come with certain, boundary conditions and,
Who gets to decide those boundaries and conditions?
I mean, who gets to decide anything in society, right? It's kind of like everyone gets together and decides it for themselves.
And it's what works, as you said before, it's a collection of what works for the self on a bigger level, being the community, and the self as a personal level. I mean, we started off in Western culture with a Christian understanding around, do unto others that you'd have done to yourself, right? And that was how we built our laws and how we built our culture and so on. And very specifically, I'm saying Western culture. And interestingly, those who pronounce they must have free speech and therefore be able to say whatever they like, no matter who it hurts, sort of also sit in that space of saying, I expect you to treat me the way I would treat you. And I find it very simplistic, and it's one of the reasons why I brought this in very specifically, this picture of my child and my grandparents. And when I brought up, some of us here have children, some don't, and when I tell my son, when he was little, he's now 19, but when I used to tell him, he's at the playground and, kids would be interacting, and if one child said something that was not nice to another child and so on, you would correct that behaviour. And for all of a sudden with free speech, we sort of go, well, we can't correct it on a grown-up level, but we most certainly always correct it on a childlike level. And there's this brokenness around that. And it comes from all sorts of types of behaviour, but free speech is a really important one. And like I said, it's not a binary thing. It's not this, you're black and you're white, you're left, you're left and you're right. It is one of those things where you have to say to yourself, is this going to be hurtful? Is it going to be hurtful to myself or to others? That really should frame everything we do, quite frankly, free speech and otherwise. Yes. So we can't function as a functioning society without that. It comes down to core values, so it falls into everything we do.
Catherine?
No, look, I can't really add anything more. I totally agree. As long as it's not doing any harm and it comes from a place of your values, and it's going to be different for everyone in every setting.
Where have you seen free speech, Jordan, most recently be the most hurtful to a degree? Where have you seen it taken too far? What's a really good recent example?
Well, I guess it all depends what you call free speech. I think the word free is a misnomer. I mean, because so far everybody said that when you speak out there are consequences, which means it's not free. You can't do it without any consequences. But speaking out with information that has consequences, all you have to do is look at the world's three biggest economies that all suffer from massive, very effective internal propaganda. Right? You've got people in Russia who are as well-educated and in some senses as worldly as us, who believe they're liberating Ukraine from the Nazis. Right? They believe it because that's what they're being told. You have people in America who believe terrible, terrible things about the Chinese because that's what their government has told them. You have people in China who believe horrible things about Australia because that's what their government has told them. America claims to have free speech, certainly doesn't. Most of the world talks about the topic. I think the issue is that while we do want to have it guided by values, it's not as simplistic as, for instance, saying if it will hurt, because change hurts. So when people speak up with ideas that are going to be different to other people's ideas, that's going to hurt some people. The challenge we have is, if it's somebody who is, to use extreme labels, if it's somebody who's speaking about Nazism or white supremacy or something extremely racist that most moderate people in the world would consider is beyond the pale, well, we want to say we don't want that kind of speech, right? What in Australia we call hate speech. We don't want that, because all that does is foster negative things in society. But how to draw the line is that you have to constantly test it against those values, and you have to find a way for society to express their view, and ultimately there have to be consequences for people who break the rules. And it's just like the issues of privacy and other things that are big in tech today, that It's not a simple question, it's not a simple answer, and it's constantly evolving. So the most important thing is that we're always talking about it.
I've got kids myself. I'm sure some of us do also. Some of us have different preferences for where we go for our trusted news source or truth, or we want to seek out facts and what's actually going on. I'd love to hear from you guys on where you go, where you trust, and where you think the next generation is going to lean for that type of info. Dave, you've been in both environments, the melting pot of the States and here.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to take an approach these days of like pushing that accountability down to them. And I've also like started to recognize that just because I've spent more years on it doesn't make me smarter or know more than they do. And in fact, I think they're contemporaneously living in this world, you know, and absorbing it at far greater rate and contemplating their future more than I do. You know, I have certain cares and, you know, desires for my kids, but at the same time, I'm not an expert like they are. So I tend to take more of the approach of like setting those high level goals or having discussions at least about what their goals should be and then how are these things supporting that. But I definitely don't want to be a dictator with no credibility. You know, I think that's the worst type of leader, is someone who just has the authority but no understanding, you know, kind of tactical or operational credibility. So yeah, it's...
Louise, you want to jump in on this one?
Oh, I've got so much to say. I'll try to keep it small. You know, I want to keep bringing it back. What do I tell my son on how to access news? And I think we have a disconnection between news and facts. We used to look at news as factual, and now, unfortunately, due to certain people within the high-end area of media who own media, have changed that game for entertainment purposes and sales, rather than actually having the integrity of what news used to be. News was factual. It wouldn't matter what you watched, what network you watched. It was almost exactly the same. And I think having to teach our children how to research factual information is actually a really important part, because you can gain your news because of the internet, because of our access to everything. Gain your news from doing really good research. And who wrote that article, for example? Who is responsible for this website? Who's paying for this company to release this information? So, you know, going back through those things. My son recently, it's his first year of voting, asked me, you know, Mum, how do I research who to vote for? Because I refuse to tell him who I'm voting for, because the statistic shows that, you know, children coming their first time voting round will vote what their parents vote. And so I said, you know, he said, should I look at the websites from all the parties? I said, absolutely not. They're not going to tell you the reality of the situation. You need to go to, you know, academics. You need to look at non-for-profits who actually lobby the government for change. Pick 3 things that matter to you and research those particular things and look at which parties are actually, or people are actually have done something about that in the past and what they promise for the future. So it's about actually teaching them research skills. But I've been making him research, like he didn't get a smartphone until he was like 16. So when he wanted to start catching the train, I made him go take a map and a timetable, a folded out one, and he had to learn it all from scratch. And, you know, I was like, when you don't know something, ask someone who does know. So he once got lost because he asked somebody that he passed on a train platform, rather than asking the person behind the counter who sells the tickets where to go. And so that's the difference about facts and news and information. We're all going to be better with knowledge, that's for sure. But where do we go for that knowledge? And I think that's what we teach our kids.
Well, Jordan, where do you go? Where is the truth? You know?
Well, I agree. It's about understanding your sources. I mean, that's what Louise was just saying. And I've never actually been big on watching the news or reading the newspapers. I mean, they can be quite interesting, but there's just a lot of misinformation and a lot of irrelevant information. You know, might be sacrilegious to say here, but I don't really care what goes on in the sports world. I mean, it's great that it goes on. I love there are people who enjoy it, and I love that Melbourne is the most active sports city in the world. It just doesn't interest me. So I don't have to pay attention to that. Except I have to know when the Grand Prix is on, because they close down the streets. And, but I mean, I've done an enormous amount of travel over the years, and I've always found it fascinating when I travel. One of the best ways to get information about the country I'm in is to watch the international news or read the international newspapers about that country. They'll all tell a very, very different story. But usually when I'm in a country and I have to go speak in front of a group, then one of the things I do is read the local newspaper, find out what are the topical issues that the community are talking about at that time, and then do some sampling of other sources to get a more balanced perspective. I don't know which one is right, if any of them. What I know is I can place my own critical assessment onto the information I'm being presented with and come up with something that sounds like it might make sense. And then have a discussion with other people who know a hell of a lot more than I do about what's going on. And it's a process of constant discovery. I was absolutely absolutely astounded several years ago now. I was staying with my cousins in Middle America, a very, very small little liberal family in a very sort of redneck part of the country. And we were watching the news, and what he was doing was, he has cable with 400 and something channels, and we're on the news sector. He was flipping from channel to channel to channel, and at first I didn't understand, and then he was explaining. There's not a single news service that he can access in the United States that is a facts-based news service. They are all heavily biased. They're biased to the left, they're biased to the right, they're biased to the green, they're biased to the local, they're biased to this, that or the other. So what he does, he knows what their biases are, and so he watches what they all say on a particular topic. All right? It's something that the president said, something that's happened in the world. He watches what they all say, and then he tries to filter from that what he thinks is going to be his view. I think it's very problematic compared to a world in which we could...
That's a lot of watching.
Yes.
Time.
News milkshake.
Well, so my response was, if none of them are worthwhile, then I won't watch any of them. And if it's really important, it'll come to the surface.
Do you feel like you know more of what's actually going on in the Ukraine at the moment or not because of the sheer amount of news coverage that's happened this time? You know, it's talked about that this war is the one that's the most documented and in our face and accessible to watch and observe. But do you feel any more informed or that you know what's actually happening?
Not particularly. I'm not a great consumer of news like Jordan, and you look at our parents' generation where they would watch the early news, the regular news and then the late news, and consume all this information and really get quite confused or feel that they have a handle on what's going on, but it's only one voice. Then you have my children's generation who don't consume mainstream media at all, may rely on YouTube, but then algorithms are being so don't get a wide cross-section of facts, or perhaps don't do research if they're not that way inclined. But I don't think we're any more aware of exactly how it is on the ground, simply because there's more accessibility. Not at all.
Dave?
I mean, I think that it's an opportunity to kind of go back to first principles and go and explore your local environment, right? I think, they're consuming news at certain levels, from state to national to global is important to a degree, but I actually think it's actually the benefit is because it's such a load of bullshit and there's no one source that you would ever really want to take as a true fact. It forces you out into the local community, right, to actually build up a true picture of what's around. And as an entrepreneur, that's the best way to find out, the kind of pulse, right? And it's all that really matters, because I don't really travel past like 5 kilometers a mile. So that's all I really need to know the facts of, like what's happening. But yeah, like Catherine was saying, like I don't consume a lot, and I look at my parents to a degree who did, and I just feel like they got it wrong. Like they just fed whatever they were.
That's terribly depressing.
Yeah, right.
Generally.
I look at my kids, and they think everything is content produced by influencers, and they're like, it's all bullshit, right? So
wow, so your kids actually can see.
Oh, they're like everything from comedic or just like fluffy dogs to talking head. Like they see it all as a single content feed. They don't go, oh, that's like news. I better better listen to what they're saying anymore than a mukbang is their nutritional information, right? Like, which I think is great because now they form all their own opinions, themselves.
So Louise, do you think that we've become more compelled to want to do something to help what's happening in Ukraine because of how much we're seeing? Or do you think maybe it's had the opposite effect and it's desensitized us to a degree because there's just so much all the time?
I think there's truth in both of those statements. There's definitely empathy fatigue, and just globally with constant the effects of climate change and so on. So there's tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. What that's having on young people's minds, we're probably not going to see that for another 10, 20 years. But in terms of finding, I think that's a really good question to follow on from the previous question, because it really narrows our focus. We don't really know what's going on in Ukraine. That's the fact. It doesn't matter what resource you access, you don't really know unless you're living there. And so I think what we really should be doing is, okay, well, I don't know, how do I help? I can't get on a plane and fly into Ukraine and, pick up a gun and start shooting people. It's just, I just never do it. But what I can do is, okay, well, how do I help those either around me? I used to go, I'll donate to here, I'll donate to the Red Cross, people that you trust to be on the ground and actually serve a real purpose. But now I even sort of bring it even closer into my space, because we're really just responsible for our own worlds. And if we all did that, if we all were responsible for everybody in our space, the world would actually be much better. And I don't mean exclusive to caring for others. I just mean that if we started there. And so I reach out to people and I think they might have relatives in Ukraine. I think, do they need something specific? So I think you can turn it that way. And again, it's how you process that information. I used to be one of those things. If you look at my filing cabinet from when I was in my early 20s, there's a big folder of letters I wrote to consulates all over the world, asking to free this, journalist and asking to do this and so on. I was just to use the only skill I knew, which was to write. And I kept all these letters from different, places around the world. And I think, and I used to feel it and hold it. And it only brings so much stress and sadness into your own world. So I think you need to find that real careful balance between, well, this is happening and it's awful. How do I then approach the situation and then teach, again, my child, my son, how do I teach him to actually not advocate for war? How does he stay away from that space? Why not just turn it off? But how's he educated by it and then act for change? So it's a really careful balance.
Before I move on to the next point, anyone else want to add anything else to that one? Good, great. Okay, so this is a random one, a little less related to what we've just discussed. I want to hear from all of you because you've obviously sat on boards, you've run businesses, you've mentored, you've advised people. Have you ever had to fire someone and was it easier than you thought or was it harder? Fired might not be the best word because that's a bit dated. You've had to, let someone go or move on within a business, but what was it like for you and what did you learn from the process? Have you gotten better at it? Who wants to go first?
I will. I've only done that once and it was a long time ago, and I think it was just as much my leadership style and immaturity perhaps at the time, naivety, inexperience. And it was a trust issue. So I had been away and this particular staff member helped herself to whatever it was that, she was doing her own work, her family's work or something on my time. And I think we were a small up and coming business at the time and I felt betrayed. So it was more of a personal thing that I felt, I needed to let that person go, probably didn't handle it very well. And that's the only time I've ever had to do that. And I think as you evolve as an employer or as a leader, as a employee, you develop your own style and your values and your communication skills improve. So I think that happens less and less as you progress in your career. And thankfully, I think I've got a good little team around me and that's probably not going to happen again.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Jordan?
Yeah, look, I think it goes all the way back to your first question about culture. So I agree. If you set the right environment, hopefully you never recruit someone who you need to fire. Certainly not for misbehaviour. But there are all sorts of reasons why you might have to let somebody go. It might be because they've done something wrong. It might be because you can't afford to keep them anymore. Australia has created a rod for our own backs because on the one hand, we've got labour laws that provide really good protection for employees and create a significant burden for employers. And that's a good thing because we're looking after the people, but it's a bad thing because it frustrates businesses and it can create the challenge that when you just can't afford to keep somebody on, the only way you can get them out under our current system is to pay them a heap of money, which is the whole reason why you're trying to let them go, that you don't have the money. So I think there's a balance that needs to be found. I've always aimed for what I call self-selection. So I try and create environments where people want to be part of the environment and people who don't want to be part of it choose not to join. You don't offer a job to someone you think won't be a good fit, but if you offer a job to someone who feels they won't be a good fit, they won't accept the offer. And that's minimised the need. And also by managing that way, what I've found is on the occasions when I've had to try and confront somebody and say it's time to go, I've sat down with them and they've usually said, "You're here to tell me it's time to leave." I go, "Yes, I am." "Yeah, I'm surprised you let me stay this long. You've tried so hard, you've helped me, you've coached me. I just can't seem to do what needs to be done, whether it was capability or it was behaviour." Okay. So I think if you're conscious of people and conscious of culture and you're always thinking about the consequences for the people as well as for the organisation, then you can, short of finding someone who's out and out breaking the rules, someone who does something completely unexpected, treats somebody badly, steals something, stuff like that, then you just have to step up. But that's easy, that's black and white. They've broken the rules are laid down, you can actually take that action. But I think the harder ones are when it's not because they've broken the rules, it's because there's not a fit or there's not enough room for them, or in a couple of occasions because you actually think they could be doing a lot better for themselves if they were somewhere else. And I learnt that the other way around. Very early in my career, I kept, it's quite common these days people change jobs. It wasn't when I started, but I was in the engineering project world where you did change jobs quite a lot. And I had a boss who came to me and said, "We've grown you from here to here, and we can't offer you. The last thing you did was this multinational project. We're never going to do one of those again. We can't offer you career growth. You've got a job here as long as you want, but take the time, go out, have job interviews. Don't make big news about it around the office," he said, but take the time, go and find a better place to be, and I'll give you the best reference I can. And that was a great lesson for me, that it really is about the people.
Louise, Dave, have you ever had to fire someone or break up with a business partner?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
Was it messy?
Oh, one time it was, and I learned never let someone go by yourself.
Ooh, okay.
Always have someone else there with you. That was a lesson I learned. I work in an industry where everyone's really passionate. So I actually implemented a company value. It was our logo. It was our mantra, and it's no one's bigger than the project. That's to keep everyone's egos in check. And so yeah, film and television, there can be a lot of people walking around with egos, and so we've often let people go because they come into a project, they work on that project, and we're like, we'll never use them again because they aren't. I don't really see them as part of the team. I mean, I'll rock up, I'll park my Tesla to the side out the way so the trucks can get in, and then I'll walk in with my blacks and I'll offload things off to the truck, and I'll ask if someone wants a coffee, and then I'll be picking up stuff off the floor off a set, and quite often people don't even know that I own the company. And then you see them and someone will come up to you, "Who gets the coffees around here?" I'm like, "You get the coffees around here." And so there's over time, and this is definitely an over time thing, you get better and better and better at managing people's expectations, managing your own expectations. That's really important. You grow up. You learn that that some people, no matter what you do, no matter how you approach that environment, if they're feeling a lot of emotion, they will react in that time. And so I had someone throw a chair and storm out the room and ducked in time, you know. So it was, yeah, and I'm like, never have not a person there again. And your business partners, I've had a situation actually where I had to let myself, I suspended myself. So one of my first companies, we were about to sell the company. I had at home, I had up on the wall all the intellectual property that I designed, working out how we were going to package that intellectual property. And I had somebody who was staying in my home and was also helping us with the charity that we were launching. I brought them over from Germany, and he took photos of it, sent it back to a friend who wanted to be an entrepreneur, and then they launched that company over there. And so because I took my own confidential company stuff, the policy was not to take stuff home or not to share this confidential stuff because it would affect our agreement with an investment firm in Silicon Valley. We lost about at least $2 million in our sale because of that. And I told everybody within the company at the time, suspended myself for a week without pay to show I broke the rules because I took home thinking that it would be safe. It's my intellectual property anyway, you know. So I set the standard. So that's the difference. So I expect of myself a certain set of behaviour, and then I hope that people follow from that leadership. And if they don't, that's okay. They come and go. They go on their own accord usually. These days now they just go on their own accord. So if they don't fit into that kind of culture. So
I'm going to finish with you, Dave. Give me your juicy breakup story.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think in like all of those situations, you know, you're dealing with a human being, right? And, you know, you're dealing with a human being that their life's about to change. And I think if you go in there with this kind of higher than thou ego, or like, I'm the boss, you know, I'm better than you, or you don't fit here anymore, or here is some bullshit excuse that we've concocted to make it easy for us, they're going to leave either way, right? But you're going to have to stick around with that memory of who you were in that moment. And I think it's just so much more. Well, first of all, I think before you ever fire anyone, you should build a compelling story to not do that. Yeah. You should show backbone inside the organization so that someone above you is not saying, get rid of Dave, right? Like, you should be going, why? You know, and if you can't be convinced of that, you know, show some courage and go, no, I'm not going to do that. But if there's a meaningful case that meets all the criteria for being a fair dismissal of someone for whatever reason, first of all, be transparent. Share that information so that person has closure and can go on. And then recognize that they're a human and like, are you okay? I hate this culture of like walking people with security and like this kind of demonstration of like force, you know, from the company. It's like, it's an inverted, you know, asymmetrical situation where you've got a single human being in a whole company. And I think that's really weak and you know, just lacks any kind of courage. So I think, like whatever you're going to do in that situation, be a human being, you know, show empathy, show care, make sure that person's okay. Think about what it's going to be like for the next, 7, 14, 21 days for that person. And then no matter what happens, you can go, we have a culture, which cares for people, and I think that's the most important part of that.
I think we're just about done. This has been another episode of 1 Minute Millionaire Roundtable. Thank you, Catherine, David, Louise and Jordan.
Thank you.
Like and subscribe, guys. You know what to do, and can't wait to see you on the next one. Thank you.